All right, my friends, I'm going to go through a few things that may be helpful to you as you write about music and songs, and that should be applicable to other things as well. So, as you approach this, there are different areas that you can talk about, and one is to sort of narrate your experience with a song or songs or some music. You know, you could talk about when you first heard something, what it meant to you at that time, and then maybe later you saw more in it, or it started to mean other things. You saw different meanings in it, or as you studied it and looked through it, you see more. So you can kind of narrate your encounter. You know, when I first heard this song, it seemed to mean this to me, and then I later saw more meanings in it. You can also talk about the context of songs. You know, what kind of time did they come out of? What was going on? What was happening with the people who wrote it and performed it? So there's your experience, there's context, and then you can also sort of look at the text or the piece itself and see how it works and what the meanings in it are. Um, Sometimes people have talked about two different things. One is aesthetics, and aesthetics is kind of how does the piece make you feel? How does the song connect with you? What sort of reactions do you have to it? And that's aesthetics, and then poetics is kind of, you can then sort of analyze it and say, well, how did they get that effect? You know, what's happening with the meaning and the way the words are laid out, and in the music, what's happening with you know, rhythm and different chords and melodies, and how do they get the effects that they get? How is the thing built? And you can start to analyze how it's built and see how it gets its effects. What did they do to bring that about? So with songs, you have both lyrics to look at and music. Uh, with lyrics, you know, I think songs are more and more kind of recognized as a form of literature and an art form, to the extent that Bob Dylan got the Nobel Prize for Literature a few years back. Uh, you know, basically for his songwriting and his innovations there. So he would be kind of high on the list of writing lyrics that have depth and complexity. Some others at the top of that list might be Leonard Cohen, who wrote Hallelujah and other songs. Joni Mitchell, probably. And others like Tracy Chapman, or more recently Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift can write a good song. Alicia Keys, Lady Gaga. So people who have some proficiency as lyricists, James Taylor uh, and Carole King would be another. You know, some of these people, they've made musicals as well out of their lyrics, and there's sort of been different waves. You know, there was sort of people like the Beatles in the '60s, and that kind of led to a sort of singer-songwriter wave with people like Jackson Browne, James Taylor, Carole King. Before that, you also had in the 40s, 40s and 50s, 30s, kind of people writing songs for Broadway, and also what they call the Great American Songbook, which are kind of classic songs by writers like And a lot of singers these days, at some point, they'll record an album of songs from that era, that are called sort of standards. And also hip hop has generated a lot of, good, interesting lyrics. So if you look at music or songs, looking at the lyrics, one thing to look for is kind of what are the contrasts in it? What are the opposites? We live in a world of opposites, light and dark, and high and low, sweet and bitter. And a lot of good pieces of writing, they'll kind of revolve around different pairs of opposites and contrasts. So you get things like at the beginning of the Hotel California, it starts, on a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. So already we've got, cool wind versus warm. There's a contrast there. And then he says, up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. So we started on a dark desert highway, but there's a light. So we have dark and light here. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. So day and night is in there as well. And there's a bit of a sense of mystery about the whole thing. It's preparing you, what's going to happen in this story. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell. And I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. So another contrast, heaven or hell could be very good. There's a hope there. There's also maybe some fear. Then she lit up a candle and she showed me the way, more light. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say. So you've got several contrasts there. And it also appeals to the senses a great deal. It's dark. There's a cool wind that he can feel. There's a warm smell of colitas, the flowers. And there's both air and the earth are in there, and the fire of the candle and light. Sometimes you'll get a four elements structure in things of earth, air, fire, and water. So you have these different contrasts. It can be contrast of two or contrast of four things. And behind that is kind of an idea of some kind of whole of the experience that you're trying to represent, kind of everything that's happening, so that there's a larger picture that unites all these contrasts and different elements. Okay, so what we read there are basically verses, the first two verses. And then you get the chorus, which is kind of welcome to the Hotel California, such a lovely place, such a lovely face. Plenty of room at the Hotel California. Any time of year you can find it here. So it goes on to tell more of the story, starting with that initial set of contrasts. Another thing to kind of look for is how do things change from the beginning to the end, Does it tell a story? Does somebody learn something in the course of this story and the song and the lyric? And that has also something to do with kind of dividing it into parts. Anytime you look at a story or an artwork, if you can divide it into parts, that's a good first step to analyzing it. This happens in the first verse, then it develops in the second verse, and then you have a kind of, a big climax in the third verse. So in songs, you can have, the verse and the chorus, those are parts. There might be other parts in there, like a pre-chorus or a bridge. And through the thing, there might be changes. Somebody could learn something, or you could look at it from a different point of view at the end. The Beatles song, I Feel Fine, it begins, I'm in love with her and I feel fine. But then at the end, it sort of swings around and says, she's in love with me and I feel fine. So it's been at least looked at from a different point of view. Point of view is another important factor. Whose eyes are we seeing the story through? So in this or other things, you can also start to think about what is the structure of the thing. And different songs are going to have different types of structures, There's the division into verse and chorus, and there's also what do they do to make up that verse. In the Joni Mitchell song, both Sides Now, she kind of uses a template. She has two stanzas of verse and then a chorus. Stanza, is like the division or building block. Often there'll be 4 lines will make up a stanza, but it could be more. So in each case, she looks at something, sort of seeing the positive aspects and then the negative. And then in the chorus says, I've looked at things from both sides now. And she uses that same structure for 3 different subjects. The first one is clouds, which, clouds are very suggestive, and you can see different shapes in them. They're kind of a fluid thing to look at. Then she looks at love, which is bigger, and then life, which is the third thing, is maybe an even bigger category. But in each case, she looks at the positive aspects, then the negative, and then says, I've looked at both sides of this. So the description of clouds, it's very descriptive, and you can imagine clouds looking like this. She says, rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air. You can see sometimes clouds look like piles of ice cream. And feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way. So it's pretty positive and pretty. But then she says, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds got in my way. So it's kind of a negative look of aspects of clouds. And then she says, I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's clouds illusions, I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. So even after all this experience, there's a sense of, well, I may not know the whole story. So she applies that template then to the idea of love and experience of love, and then to life. And says, well, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. So again, that sense of kind of opposites and looking at things from more than one side so that you get a whole picture. Now, in the Bob Dylan song, Blowing in the Winds, that song is kind of structured by a lot of questions. And, you could say they're rhetorical questions in the sense that there's not a really easy, quick answer for them. And you do get sort of an answer in the chorus, but it's a somewhat mysterious one that's open to a lot of different interpretations, which is that the answer is blowing in the wind. So if I can remember, it's something like, how many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? And then how many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Already you've got sort of some contrasts there between land and sea, and male and female, and human and animal. And the song develops as it goes and kind of explores more and more territory. And it asks, how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? And ultimately starts to get into the question of kind of empathy or sympathy. How many ears does one person need before they start to hear? That's not quite right, but it's something like that. So it has a progression, and it moves towards an idea of sympathy or empathy, which is often one of the things that we learn in an artwork is it moves towards compassion in some way. So there's a progression, and it has its own kind of structure of questions, and then an answer, which can be interpreted in different ways. And one way of saying that it's ambiguous. It has an ambiguous thing. There are different possible interpretations. So if the answer is blowing in the wind, well, that may mean, well, you're never going to get it. It's always kind of elusive. It could mean it's all around you, like it's obvious, it's in the air around you. There are other interpretations, So, you want to break it down into parts and try to say, what is the structure of this thing and how does it progress as it goes? What does it lead to? That can also work in music. You have different parts of the music, and there can be contrasts in the mood. One part can be kind of upbeat, another can be sort of sad or, wondering. So you want to think about how each part feels and sounds to you. What kind of emotions and thoughts does it explore? And you can talk about it as just, what is the quality of it? Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it moody? Is it happy? Is it fast? Is it slow? Again, things work by contrasts and opposites. What kind of rhythm does it have? Does it have a nice melody? Does it have harmonies? The Beach Boys, their songs have kind of very rich harmonies. Rhythm, harmony, and melody are kind of some of the main elements of the musical side of things. You also have minor and major chords, which you can hear usually well enough. I'll play a couple chords for you just so you get minor and major. I'll do first minor and then major. So minor chord is a little darker. Major is lighter. Minor. Major. And a lot of good songs will go back and forth. But if something's bright, you can talk about the kind of major happy part of the song, and then a minor chord. There are a lot of other chords. You have like a seventh chord, which is a jazzier kind of chord that the Beach ninth chord, which Jimi Hendrix used. So you may or may not have the different people have different amounts of musical vocabulary, but you can always sort of describe it in how it feels or how it sounds or how it makes you feel. So those are basically some of the elements that you can work with to talk about this stuff. And for examples of good writing, I would about music, I would look at Rolling Stone magazine. And if you go around on their site, you can find articles about different people. And there are also ways to get into their sort of archive of articles from the past. Some of their good writers are Michael Gilmore and another guy, Rob Sheffield, who has written a book about the Beatles and about David Bowie and other people. So that's it. I'm going to stop here, and I'll stop for a minute. And I think, well, let's see, I think I've covered everything that I want to talk about today, and I'll say a few more things later this week. But that should be somewhat helpful in thinking about some of the basic categories to think about in terms of songwriting, and try to look for complexity and to pick up different meanings of things. There's ambiguity, and if something is written well, it can be taken in different ways, sometimes contrasting ways. And, that shows kind of that things can be looked at from different points of view and have some complexity and depth to them. And you can also ask kind of what is learned from the experience, what do we take away from it, and does the person singing seem to get more wisdom? Have they learned something at the end of it? All right, so hope that was helpful, and enjoy what you're doing. Try to find something to write about that you would like and that is interesting to you, that you're intrigued by. So thank you, and enjoy the still summery weather.